All right, assalamu alaikum. I'm Tom. Welcome to California.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. We have Yusuf with us, young organizer also. First question, what is power?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, sallallahu. Power is the ability to organize a message, to organize money, to organize people, and to organize action. Okay, so if you're able to, let's say that we want everybody just to say, we want 3 million Muslims across the world to say alhamdulillah at the same time. If we're able to pull that off, that's power. Getting a lot of people to do the same thing at the same time. In order to do that, you need to organize your money so that you can develop the tools that's going to be able to reach those people. You need to organize your message. So you're going to convince those people why they should be doing that at that specific time. And you need to organize the people. You need to have the people knowledge to know who are the people that you're reaching out to in the first place. But in essence, you know, I give the example of, and it's relevant to the Muslim community in the US because we have, at least in the immigrant community, we got a lot of doctors. But at the end of the day, they're just employees. Right? They don't really have much power. Or let's say they haven't organized their power. But imagine if all the doctors that we had in some of the communities, if they organized something like a walkout for Palestine or a strike for Palestine, it would have an immense impact. Okay?
That's very interesting.
But you would need to develop a message, organize a message to convince them that they're not going to lose their jobs. You'd have to probably organize some money to cover their expenses in case some of them were attempted to be punished financially for their decision. And you would have to get them to do the same thing at the same time.
When you think about power from an Islamic perspective, you know, perhaps is there an equivalent word that's commonly used when you look through the Seerah?
Allah says quwwah. Allah says in Surah Al-Anfal, وَأَعِدُّ لَهُم مَا اسْتَطَعْتُم مِّن قُوَّةٍ. He says, prepare for them whatever you can of power. And this is a very, very important central ayah that Allah says in the Quran. Now, what people lose in the sauce is that the ayah continues to give illustrative examples of what power looked like at that time. So then Allah talks about horses and you know, these sorts of things. But the general command and imperative is a general one that might the manifestations of which might change from time to time and place to place. So if Allah says وَأَعِدُّ لَهُم مَا اسْتَطَعْتُم مِّن قُوَّةٍ, prepare for them whatever you can of power, that means that if you live in 2024, your power might be a studio with a podcast mic. That might be part of it. Okay, the ability to organize people financially, like in the doctor scenario we laid out, the ability to do a tuition strike if there's a university that they're trying to crack down on pro-Palestinian activism and you organize a tuition strike. Like that is power. Okay, so we absolutely, this is one thing that unfortunately with sort of secularism, and we've got sort of a secular understanding of Islam that's only limited to the 4 walls of the masjid and the 5 pillars that we learn at Sunday school, we forget that Islam is meant for all parts of society and it's meant to inform everything that we do. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that we have an imperative to build a capacity for power. And if we don't, like Allah said in another surah, that if it wasn't for the capacity to check people by means of others, as he says, then it's an amazing ayah because he says not only would there not be any mosques, but it's beyond that. There would not be any monasteries, any churches, any synagogues. And he names these houses of worship specifically. So this is not like a tribalistic, like a Muslim supremacist sort of thing. It's really just the conception of the world where when the righteous people have influence and power, everybody benefits. Okay? And when the wicked people have influence and power, everybody suffers. And so there's a mandate in Islam that the righteous people have to have influence and that righteous people have to run things. And if they don't, as Allah said, وَإِلَّا تَفْعَلُوا تَكُنْ فِتْنَةٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَفَسَادٌ كَبِيرٌ. That he says, وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. The people, your enemies, the people who reject faith, they are helping each other. إِلَّا تَفْعَلُوهُ. If you don't do the same, if you don't organize at least as much as they do, there's going to be great trial and affliction and hardship.
That's very interesting. You have a very concise answer to what power is from the Islamic tradition. When you studied Islam and you see other people that go and study Islam, is it a common theme or topic that people talk about, or is it something that's just like an afterthought, like the idea of power? We need to do something else.
No, it's completely hidden because we have secularized curriculums. You know, so I mean, I have, alhamdulillah, Allah willed it for me that I studied political science as my first degree, and then I went on
so
to
you studied political science.
Yeah, I have a
before
degree
you
in
went-
political
okay,
science.
okay.
Yeah, and then I accepted Islam, and then I went to study traditionally, quote unquote. But that's what we're talking about. How traditional is it?
Yeah.
If you go to the Islamic University of Medina, if you go to Azhar, if you go to the other institutions,
Yeah.
you're not sitting in a circle in the masjid.
Yeah.
You're sitting in a classroom with a curriculum and professors. And I'm not saying I'm not being ungrateful. Like, there's so much khair in that.
Yeah.
But you also have to understand that it is a modern curriculum with a modern pedagogy and a modern take on the deen.
Yeah.
To more or less extents, right? And you might have a professor who understands that and is actually able to push against that and bring something else into that space. However, the logic of the space is it's a very modern, it's even a secularized one. Okay, so they're not necessarily teaching power building in Islam.
Is it a thought for some scholars? Like, the scholars come and talk about this like behind closed doors, like, hey, this is how power dynamics work. This is how change happens. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen some scholars, but is it commonly talked about? Or
there's a discipline, the siyasa shar'iyya, which is the politics of the Sharia, or there's this space within Islamic law which is attempting to bring i'zaz to the deen, right? To bring dignity to the deen and dignity to the Muslims. And it's an area of scholarship, but as you could maybe guess, that depending on what part of the Muslim world that you're in, those conversations are quite controlled, or they're discouraged, or they're mamnu', they're completely forbidden in some places. So a lot of times it's hush-hush. Sometimes things are dealt with superficially. Sometimes things are dealt with very well. But this is definitely, when it comes to part of the revival that I think that we're seeing across the Muslim world, this is definitely a front in it. The articulation and the not a reinterpretation, it's really just a recovery and a rediscovering of a lot of what's already been written and articulated for 1400 years.
When you think about the scholars and the imams that are involved in politics, right? There's perhaps some people that are part of movements, and that's very clear. But then there's people that are in like sort of the gray area. They're not part of a specific movement. They're not part of anything else, but they are engaging to change things. Have you seen that be effective, or is it just sort of like muddy the waters and like not really give clarity on what Islamic politics is?
Yeah, it depends. I've definitely seen both. I mean, I think that you can imagine a scenario in which we have different priorities and we have even different opinions on things, but that we still have the correct al-wala wal-bara'a. We still have the correct loyalty towards each other. We're not going to sell each other out. We're not going to use the security state or the apparatus of anti-terror law to run to the FBI and say, oh, this guy over here, I think he's a terrorist. I think he's an extremist. Yeah. Right? Like, so that's something that we can't tolerate within our communities. But there is room for it, and I've seen it happen where people they're able to have different perspectives and opinions and even interests, depending on what sub-community you're a part of. But there has to be coordination between those different movements. And we have to have, again, the al-wala wal-bara'a, that we know that this is an in-house thing. Yeah. We have to differentiate between in-house and out-house. And I know you wanted to talk about alliances and coalition work, and this is a huge dimension of that we run towards quote-unquote allies way prematurely before we do the work within the community to shore up our own, and which is contrary to what Allah says in the Quran when He says, "Innama waliyukum Allahu wa rasuluhu walladhina amanu," that your only protectors are Allah and the Prophet and the people who believe. And actually, Imam Dawood Walid out of Michigan, he's pointed out in his book Towards Sacred Activism that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about wala, which is the closest thing we could translate as allyship, allyship's only for the believers. It's only for the believers. Now, you could do coalition work with people who aren't, but that's not an in-house thing. So we have to be really careful to resist the temptation to run outside of the community. It might be easier in some sort of sense because it's hard.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a famous clip with Nelson Mandela when they asked him about Gaddafi. Do you remember that clip?
What did he say about Gaddafi? He said
they basically asked Nelson Mandela, like, how you have a relationship with Gaddafi?
Yes.
And he's like, this is our issue. Yeah. If someone's putting resources in front of us for us to fight our battle, who are you to come in between, right? Yeah. And we don't care about essentially your metrics in the sense that we care about our liberation and our fight.
That's a moment of asserting your sovereignty. Yeah. And I think that us as a community, as a Muslim community, we have to start to assert our sovereignty in these things. That we can't let other people dictate who we're going to talk to and who we're not going to talk to, or what we're going to support and what we're not going to support, because that violation of our sovereignty ends up in it's actually a type of colonization where our own movement for our own issues becomes colonized by another logic, another value system, another episteme.
And we can't boycott. I mean, we have an administration now. We have the Trump administration, which has gone after many other communities.
Yeah.
And the reality is we do stand for those causes. We stand for people that are impoverished. We stand for immigration. We stand for people that are struggling, the everyday people. And we don't want to create an environment where we're hostile to any race or anything like that. But for us as a community, we still have to negotiate what we can with the administration because we want to end a genocide, right? And if Trump is opening some door there, there's going to be something that's happening, and we have to create some space, right?
Well, it's all depend on how do we understand who's going to make the change, right? Like, I think there's a real mistake that a lot of us, just American society, makes. We have a superhero complex when it comes to, and a savior complex when it comes to elected officials. We think that we're electing someone who's going to end the genocide. No, we're not. We're going to end the genocide.
Yeah.
Right? Like the who's going to liberate Palestine? The Palestinians are going to liberate Palestine. Right? What's our role in that?
Yeah.
Our role is making the support for genocide so costly and inconvenient that everybody walks away from it, right? So we need to, I think we need to ditch the mentality that it's like, you know, Trump's going to do this or Harris is going to do that or someone's going to do that. They're not going to do anything. Well, whatever they're going to do, let's put it this way. Whatever they're going to do, we're going to be the ones to force them to do it.
Yeah.
And so we need to rather think of it as, what are the levers that we have to pull? What's the power that we have to build? What is the levers that we have to exert in order for them to move? Because they're certainly not going to move out of the goodness of their own hearts. They're politicians.
Yeah.
Right?
I think the interesting thing with you compare Trump and Kamala, there's probably more pain points in the Trump administration to kind of jab at him to put pressure than Kamala, because he has all these hotels everywhere. He has businesses. He has a family empire. He's embedded in the UFC. He has a lot of Muslims around him. So there's a way to put more pressure on him than perhaps Kamala, who just is checked out. Now she's just like, whatever. She's of no relevance to anybody, right?
Yeah. No, it's definitely interesting. I mean, like Kamala definitely had made the decision at a certain point that I'm not going to compromise an inch in a way that will dent my support from the Zionists.
Yeah.
And I'm going to bet that it's not going to punish me at the ballot box. And alhamdulillah, she was wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when it comes to Trump, he's less ideologically, I think, wedded to Zionism. I think that he's more of an opportunist, a transactionalist. I don't think that he believes in very much of anything other than himself. So you're right. I mean, there is a certain type of opportunity there. But again, the work that's done, it's us that are doing the work. It's not going to be him doing the work. It's not
out of the goodness of his heart.
No,
he's going to wake up just one day and
No, never. We have to create a situation that it works with his ego, it works with his selfishness, it works with his maniac, tendencies, in order to deliver a result that we want.
So that's a good point. I want to kind of go into this idea of dealing with egomaniacs, selfish people, and things like that, because we're all, when we grew up in the Muslim community, we've all dealt with a lot of egomaniacs. Unfortunately, some of them run masajid, but no offense to some of them, but we've dealt with those type of personalities, and we've had to navigate it. But what are there references? I mean, there are references. What are some really good references from the Islamic tradition of the Prophet ﷺ, or even like some of the Khulafa that have dealt with people that are egomaniacs, despotic, and have these terrible attitudes, but you ultimately have to do something to get things going?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's definitely something that needs to be articulated and studied. One thing that comes to mind immediately is the whole dynamic between Musa and Fir'aun. It's not a perfect illustration of what you're driving at, but it's related, which is that the arrogant will always overplay their hand at some point. And what you have to do is you have to put yourself in a position where you can punish them when they do. And we've seen that, honestly, we've seen that with the LGBTQ lobby. They overplayed their hand when it came to imposing curriculums, and they were going down to elementary schools. And then look at all the backlash that generated. And then we've seen that with Zionists, that the genocide has become so ugly, which, let's be clear, there was a slow drip genocide when it was liberal Zionism or when it was the Democrats in charge. But now it's become so ugly and in your face that it generates a tremendous energy against it and a blowback and repercussions. So there's a way in which sometimes, and this goes to your point about the scary prospect of 4 years under Trump, is that sometimes things have to get worse in order to become clear, right? That when things are not bad, when they're on slow drip, okay, like the West Bank. Let's take the West Bank. The West Bank is already annexed, like de facto. The way that it's cut up, the way that it's controlled, it's already everything but annexed.
That's the favorite talking point for the Democratic Party.
That's exactly
is to
what
keep
I'm
bringing
saying.
up West Bank.
So then, if that happened under the watch of the Democrats, okay, but it was done with like politeness and DEI, political correctness, and all this other stuff, it generated a lot less backlash than if Trump goes out and even Netanyahu goes out and does something crazy and wild. Everybody says, this is crazy, we have to stop it. Now, that's difficult because that means that we're now in a game where we have to tolerate a certain amount of pain that we have to actually suffer. And that's why, you know, people who are saying it's like, well, they're going to come after CARE, they're going to come after your nonprofits, they're going to come after your mosques. They will. They will. And they're already, that's in the pipeline. They're going to come after the student movement. They're going to come after pro-Palestinian activism. They're going to. But my question to push back against that as a justification of vote for Harris is, what if that is exactly what has to happen in order for the whole occupation to fall? And if you look at the story of Musa and Fir'aun, that's kind of what happens. Like the arrogant, every step that he takes, that Fir'aun escalates and escalates and escalates. And his oppression becomes more unhinged and more unhinged and more unhinged. Right? He resorts to propaganda. He makes up lies. When the magicians accept Islam, he comes with this crazy like hoax conspiracy. It's like, oh, he's the one that taught you guys magic. You guys are all in cahoots. It's all conspiracy. He gets more and more unhinged and he keeps on escalating. They just want to leave. He won't even let them leave. He could have let them go. But he no, I'm going to pursue you and I'm going to hunt you down. And that was all just him falling into the trap. Right? So there's a way in which, yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, we're going to have to suffer. The people of Palestine are already suffering. The people of Gaza have been suffering. There's more suffering that's ahead in our future. But what we hope for is a scenario in which our suffering is one that we're just holding on to the point where the arrogant overplay their hand so much that Allah opens up that door and it's their complete downfall.
When you think about, and before I switch, I really want to talk about post-election strategy, but a lot of thoughts came to my mind when we mentioned all these concepts. For people that are Muslims getting engaged in these political spaces, you talked about allyship, we talked about dealing with arrogant people, and just as a whole, from the Islamic tradition, what are those political skills and leadership skills that you need to have in whatever realm, right? Because you're dealing with many different types of people, going to put you on the edge, your emotions are all over the place. So what are those things that you really need to be a good, solid,
no, definitely. And this is a really important thing because everybody has a different temperament and personality. And one thing that the Prophet ﷺ was masterful at was putting people in their proper role to succeed and to flourish. Right? So the people, not everybody was cut out for military service, for military campaigns. And they didn't have to be, right? Not everybody was cut out to do da'wah or to be the emissaries that would go take the message of Islam to a particular group. And he was very careful in who he selected for those jobs. He knew who had credibility and who was trustworthy, not just trustworthy from the back end, but also trustworthy on the user interface side where you're coming to a group of people. Like when the one Jewish tribe in Medina betrayed the Muslims, and so they were asking for a ruling, the Prophet ﷺ knew that rather than him give the ruling, he would send Sa'd ibn Mu'adh to give the ruling because he had so much credibility with them that they would accept it. And in fact, they accepted. They said, they were happy. When the Prophet ﷺ appointed him, they said, awesome, great. Now they thought that they were going to get off without any punishment. Ended up not that way because Sa'd was just. But however, you see the siyasa of the Prophet ﷺ, that he was always thinking very carefully about who to send to where. And that continued with the Khulafa al-Rashidin when it came to the military campaigns. There's the famous stories about Khalid ibn al-Walid, who was obviously amazing, but even when the army started getting too dependent on him, like the star soccer player, the star basketball player, and like acting like we can't win without him. He took him back and he switched him up and he put him in a different place because they understood that stuff very, very well. And so when it comes to understanding how people are built, the example that I've given is that if you take a selfie with an elected official and you're happy about that, You do not have any business doing politics whatsoever. If you're going to take a picture of yourself at the White House iftar or some stupid PR stunt that they do, run away from it. Like, please don't put yourself into politics. Go do relief work. Go teach the kids Quran. Go do something else. You can be of benefit other way, but you're not built for it. What did Sulaiman say to Bilqis when Bilqis tried to send a gift? Bal antum bi hadiyatikum tafrahun. He said, you guys are pleased with your gifts. You guys are happy when you get gifts. That in order to do the work of politics, you have to be able to negotiate. You have to see through people. I'll give you an example that happened to us in Pennsylvania. Susan Wild, genocide Democrat, just got defeated, alhamdulillah, this past election cycle. The first thing that she did when some of the Muslim religious leaders were in the area, she gathered them together and she had a sit-down meeting with them, made them feel all special, and said, you know, it's like I just got back from a trip to Israel, but I demanded that they take me to see the other side of things too. So he was very sly, very slick. And she thought that that was going to be the thing that kind of got her credibility with the Muslim community. And for a little bit, it did, until they started noticing how she moved and how she was supporting Zionism and trying to play both sides. Then there came the day where she tried to show up to where the Muslim community, they stonewalled her. They said, no, you're dead to us. You're not going to be able to come into our events or get the mic and give a little spiel or take pictures. Where she came to the mosque, and the security team already had been told, don't let her in. And so they kept her in the parking lot. And she had to turn around and leave.
This person's in Congress.
This person was a congresswoman. This is the rep. This is the rep of, what is it, 21st or 22nd District of Pennsylvania. So it's like, that's the type of, you need to be able to see through people. You need to be able to see, to not believe what people say. Study how they move. Study how they act. You need to be, you need to have foresight. You need to not be not be gullible. Okay. You need to understand where people's interests are and be able to explain things in people's interests. Sometimes we make this like moral grandstanding and appeal to politicians. It's like, they don't care about you. They don't like you. And we don't have to like them. But that doesn't mean, that's not the right door to go through when you're talking about politics. What the door to go through is going through people's interests. And people are going to say, oh, you're too Machiavellian. This is not... No,
that was my next question. I was like,
your understanding of Islam is too secularized. That's what I say. Because people have an idealized understanding of Islam where it's just like, we're just going to call on people to do the right thing and do that. No, that's not how the Prophet ﷺ interacted with politics. That's why did he, when he came Fath Mecca, okay, he marched his army, he called Abu Sufyan out, he brought Abu Sufyan out, and he had him on an elevated place, and he marched the army underneath Abu Sufyan so Abu Sufyan could see the power. Abu Sufyan already knew that Islam was the truth. That wasn't the problem. He needed to be strong-armed. He needed to be like, listen, this is what's about to happen. Do the right thing. Do the thing that's in your interest, right? So I mean, this is, if you look at the message and the tone of the Prophet ﷺ when he sent letters to the different leaders of the different empires. Hard words, hard negotiations, right? This is what it takes to deal with politics.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of my favorite books is a book called Rules for Kings by Nizam al-Mulk.
Okay,
and it's very powerful because it really talks about how you build administrative practices, how you deal with people, and it's a lot of difficult things you have to do. And one of the challenges that as a community we prematurely enter these spaces. And then you start dealing with politicians, dealing with other people. There's power dynamics. They're playing you. There's all these things that you're getting toyed with. And it's almost better if you don't even have somebody there.
No,
someone to be trained.
You've set us back, essentially, because now what they're doing is they're using you for credibility, and no one can make the argument that you haven't engaged in the Muslim community because you've been tokenized. And I say, no, look, I have this selfie with this hijabi that I took when I came to the masjid, and now we have to, well, that person doesn't represent us, and that it's sloppy. When the Muslims were in Habasha, right, for the hijrah, and they were called in front of Najashi, they only let Ja'far ibn Abi Talib speak. They didn't let anybody else speak. And that's like a very important, I think, lesson for us when it comes to being organized and being disciplined. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala criticizes the Muslims for this in, I forget, is it Al Imran or is it Ma'idah? وَإِذَا جَاءَهُمْ خَبْرٌ مِّنَ الْأَمْنِ or أَمْرٌ مِّنَ الْأَمْنِ أو الْخَوْفِ أَذَاعُوا بِهِ. He says that any little news that comes to you, it's like you guys advertise it. It's like, if only they had gone back and referred it to Allah's messenger and the people who understand. So Allah already differentiates between the Muslims. There's people who have understanding of these things and there's people who don't. And not just air your dirty laundry out. Everybody takes to a podcast, and this cracks me up post-election. It's like, no, I don't think the Muslims really swung the election. It's like, yeah, Rajal. It's or as Sammy says, scoot. It's like just shut your mouth. That's how are you being like a talking head and a commentator on this? You're actually hurting the Muslim community in the way that you're doing that, right? So you need to have this discretion about like what you're saying in front of who. So this is something that we find all throughout. Again, it has yet to be put into a book that I'm aware of. But all this stuff has to be, consolidated into a book of how the Prophet ﷺ moved with politics.
Yeah. There was a good book called Enjoy Your Life. I don't know if you heard of that book.
I don't think
it's
so.
written by one of the scholars in Saudi. But the whole book is about the art of the Prophet ﷺ's interactions. And if you go through the book, it's, a few hundred pages. Everything is about how he worked with difficult people, softened their hearts, and got them on their side, or even dealt with difficult people and got whatever he was pushing at that point. But it's definitely a skill set. You have to train yourself. You have to train yourself in your private world and your public realm, because it all reflects itself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ would never get angry about his own honor, but he would get angry for the honor of the deen, right? And that's an important differentiation that shows a level of maturity that we all have to aspire to. That most of us are only reacting to how we're treated personally. Yeah. If someone slights you or you don't get credit for something that you did, right? Most of us find that difficult on the nafs and difficult on the ego, and we want the recognition, and we get jealous at somebody who does a better job than us. Yeah. Those are all liabilities in the political space. Yeah. You need to have that quality that the Prophet ﷺ had, where, if it was about him, he didn't care, right? You get credit, don't get credit, it doesn't really matter. But when it comes to the deen and the values and the principles, like that's what matters. Like we have to protect that thing. And that's when we'll actually call somebody out. Yeah. Like we had to call out Mehdi Hassan. We had to call out individuals that broke rank. Yeah. It wasn't because we like to criticize people or we like to create a stir on social media. We actually would really prefer to not do that if we could. Yes. However, there are certain situations where you have to check somebody.
Yeah. An interesting thing about Mehdi Hassan, and I don't know him personally, but some mutual friends, it's almost like, he's taking some positions that almost like, you're like, why is he taking this position? He's not this dumb. But on the other hand, I've heard very strategically, he's taking these positions to get into the mainstream. So there's the idea that if he gets the Muslim community to attack him a little bit, he can get back into the mainstream conversation on things.
The 10D chess argument. He's playing 10-dimensional chess. But I don't know best. I hope that's true. I mean, I'm not as optimistic as you. But, because people don't realize this. People don't realize how there's a transformative element of these things. Yeah. You can get into something and tell yourself, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to have good. Like how many people that get into Congress or get into an elected position, they say, I'm going to change. Even look at AOC. Yeah. Look at AOC. Yeah. Look at AOC's speeches when she's campaigning before she becomes an elected, and look at the last couple of years, especially this current election. She became exactly the thing that she hated. Yeah. She became exactly the thing that she criticized back before she was a congresswoman. Yeah. Right? How does that happen? It happens because there's a transformative dimension to everything that you do. It creates, as the Greeks called it, habitus. There's other ways to talk about it, that you think that you're going to be the same person here as you are there. No, you're not. Well, you're going to change and change and change and change, and you're not even necessarily paying attention to the ways in which you're changing, to the point where when you get there, you finally have the relationships, you finally have the power, and then you said back here, you said that once you get there, you're going to flex it, you're going to use it, then you don't use it. That has happened so many times.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I'm not making the case that he was right in his position, but the idea that everything's a marketing strategy is very interesting. Like he understands the Muslim community's voices, he understands the MSNBC space and the mainstream and stuff. And it's almost like when you're in that space, you're like utilizing everyone to your benefit to kind of get your message out. But it's almost like, at what point is it to the benefit of anybody? Right.
No, that's the truly Machiavellian thing that I think is not. And again, like I'd prefer to just talk about the principle than the people. But like, let's take it as a case study in a dynamic that is actually a quite common dynamic, right? Which is that it's the shaitan always gives you a maslahah. Yeah. There's always a maslahah. We can always, and that's how he approaches people who are otherwise pious or they want to do the right thing. It's like you can think of a way in which it makes sense. But the problem is that if you continue down that path of logic, usually you end up far astray from where you initially intended. And so, you know, the nafs is a very tricky thing. Like we really are talented at deluding ourselves. And I'll just put my own self out there, like just to not throw strays at anybody, just like myself. You can delude yourself so easily into thinking that you're doing something right, or that what you're doing is like a part of a larger strategy. It's like not that bad, and that, you know, you're like going to slowly, incrementally change things. It's a constant thing that every person has to be on guard about.
Yeah. Yusuf, you got some thoughts?
Yeah. So we're now looking at post-election. Trump won presidency. They won the Senate, the Republicans, and they also won the House. We've seen before he won a Yemeni imam that promoted him and said that he promises peace in the Middle East. We all know that's not true. Mahdi Hassan, actually, because we were just talking about him, had him on an episode and just went full on against him. What are your stands on that? How do you see that our Muslim Ummah, we have, I think, nearly a little over 3 million in America, and we are so divided and so split up, Democrats and Republicans, some at Green Party, some with Dr. Cornel West, and so on and so forth. We're not united in one voting bloc, which makes us weaker a little bit. But how do you see it from now on that we have 4 years of this full-on Republican takeover?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really important. The last year has been a year of sort of revealing our flaws and what are our weaknesses and what we have to work on. There's a lot of political immaturity in our community, and there's a lot of disconnect that is rampant throughout. And we were talking about this on the way over here, which is really we're reaping the harvest of those mistakes in how we built our community. So one of the mistakes that we've made is the lack of connectivity between the inner city communities and the suburban communities, the lack of connectivity between the African-American communities and the immigrant, quote unquote, communities, right? That these are all things that now become very relevant in an election year with genocides going on, when you try to have a conversation or convince or have a dialogue about different interests, and then people, they don't forget, like there's legitimate grievances about not showing up for a certain segment of our community when they needed it. And then the attitude, it was very reasonable attitude to have, is like, well, why should we stick our necks out for you when you didn't, or you're still not?
Hey, you're still continuing to continue
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, those are all very relevant things that are at this point multi-generational issues that we have to figure out. I would really love, and I'll say this on whatever platform I get, I would really love these conferences and conventions that we have, MAS, ICNA, ISNA, whatever. You know, I don't have a whole lot of hope for ISNA, but let's just stick to MAS and ICNA.
You could always run for board.
And the and the others, that we would just, if we're doing a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that we would just clear one day, and all the big scholars that we bring in, we'd send them into the inner city masjids, and we'd have them do programs. And then the other 2 days, we'd have the imams of the inner city masjids come in and do talks. I mean, why aren't we doing that? Why haven't we done that? Or fundraise. I have yet to, I mean, listen, like Mass ICNA happens in Baltimore every year, in Baltimore, right? It's like, has there ever been, maybe there has there ever been a fundraiser for some of the masjids in Baltimore at these conferences or at these conventions? Some of these places, they pass around the hat to keep the lights on. I've been in some of these, not in Baltimore, but more in the Philly Camden area where I'm from and more familiar with. Like, there's masjids where you pass around the hat just to pay the bills. That you're still in debt. Is this, we don't want vultures.
And we have Muslim businesses in those same communities that
I don't even open
taking stuff and different types of businesses. There's bad business, halal business, and then
there's some that
halal businesses. They all exploit. Right?
There's some that are exploitative. So we need to and then they'll say, well, there's a fatwa on the Hanafi madhab that we listen. That's not the point. The point is that that's not how you build a community. And then when a genocide happens, and then it's an election year, then you see the results of having that Sami Hamdi would call it dajjalic, I would say myopic, the myopic perspective on community building. It's like, if you're only trying to get away with what's barely permissible, maybe if you squint, then these are the results that we're going to have. instead of taking an ihsan approach, is like, what's the best thing that we could do? How's the best situation look? So those are the things that come to the fore that we really need to address in a systematic way.
Yeah.
You know, the whole celebrity dawah culture, the failure of the mosques, right? The mosques, we've done research at Yaqeen Institute, over half of the mosques in America don't have a full-time imam. And the average tenure of an imam is 2 years, which is nothing. Imams are undermined. They're employees. They're controlled by the boards in most mosques. So how do you expect a community leader to emerge? If you get a community leader, the second that they disagree with the board, he's out the door, right? So these are all things that this past election cycle has turned the light on and shown our flaws. So our project from now is not just about how to deal with electeds and how to that's part of it. But we really have to shore up these community issues as well if we're going to be able to move forward together. So I don't think that we have to be united. To get back to your initial question, I don't think that we have to be united in the sense that we all have to have the same opinion, that we have to have the same calculus, we have the same priorities. Naturally, people are going to have different opinions on things. But what we can't have is these types of issues where we don't even have a community. Let's be frank. It's like we call it the Muslim community, but we're not really there yet.
Everyone's fragmented.
Everyone's extremely fragmented. And exactly. We're kind of pretending. So if we get to the point where we remedy some of these disconnects and these fragmentation, then at least we can coordinate. At least we can have, again, that wala wal bara'a, where we sit down amongst ourselves and say, what are you guys thinking for this? What are you guys thinking for that? Well, here's what here's where we're at. Where are you at? Here's what we're going to think about doing. What are you guys going to do? That way, at least we cannot undermine each other, and perhaps then we can use each other. Maybe there's a scenario in which the Yemeni imams have an in the Trump campaign, though I'm very skeptical of that. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that somebody's got somebody on the inside that we can potentially influence, right? That's a community-wide asset. That shouldn't just be dead and buried within the Yemeni community that happened to come out. That should be something that the entire community, they say, okay, you've got this on the inside. You move like this. We're on the outside. We're going to move like this. And we're over here and we're going to move like this. And we all have a sort of sense of this strategy. So if you're on the inside and you believe in influencing things from the inside, which I'm very skeptical that works, but you can attempt to make it known that there was this displeasure at this betrayal, that there was sort of statements and promises made, and it doesn't seem very good, like those things are going to be even close to a remote reality. For the people on the outside, then I think that the abandoned Biden formula of figure out a threat and promise to deliver that threat if X isn't done has been useful, and it's worked. So if you think about it this way, how often does one party get to control the presidency and the House and the Senate? It doesn't really happen very often. And that's like the trifecta that everybody dreams about, because then you can ram through whatever you want. They only have that as a guarantee for 2 years. Midterms are in 2 years. And midterms, honestly, we have a much higher chance of impacting than the generals because the turnout's a lot lower. So if we're able to organize, you could see a scenario in which we say, hey, Republicans, if you don't stop this now, if you don't deliver on this promise to stop the genocide, then we're going to make sure that the House goes back to the Democrats in 2 years. And then you have your monopolies gone, and now you're going to have to, everything's just going to be undermined.
When you think about, you went into political science as a background, and now you think the Muslim community has been in the U.S., at least the immigrant community has been here for a pretty long time, in the last 70, 80 years. African-American community has been here for much longer. Why haven't we built power? Specifically on Palestine, why haven't we started building power? Why we just wait till this last year to actually start thinking strategically about these things?
If you want the answer to that, you got to watch the first opening scene of The Godfather Part 1.
I love The Godfather, but I can't remember the scene.
Well, so you've got the guy that comes in to, Vito Corleone, he's the mob boss, and his daughter's getting married. It's the wedding day, but he's taking appointments in his office. And it's actually very, very artistically beautiful scene, because he starts out with the first line of the movie, "I believe in America." And he talks about how, he had the situation. His daughter was preyed upon by some young boys. And basically the long and short of it was that he didn't get justice from the court system. He didn't get justice from the police. And now he's asking Vito Corleone to do his methods.
Yeah.
Right. And Vito's response to him was like, you thought that you came here, you thought the police were going to work for you. You thought the courts were going to work in your favor.
Yeah.
You thought that you didn't need a friend like me.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a certain gullibility,
Yeah.
okay, that many, not all, of the immigrant community comes with, that's tied up with a little bit of inferiority complex.
Yeah.
It's tied up with a little bit of economic motive because a lot of folks, not refugees, but many people came here for economic opportunity, not for dawah, okay? And then you have this sort of American dream.
Yeah.
You have this idea that, you know, America's got, you know, freedoms and it's a fair place. And if we just work hard and play by the rules and stay out of the way and we're likable enough that nobody will bother us. Or maybe we could put it in 3 acts. So act 1 is we're just going to keep to ourselves and just, you know, make it economically and that'll be enough.
Yeah.
Okay, well, then 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
I was like, well, that didn't work.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
now we're all potential criminals.
Yeah.
So it's like, then I was like, well, maybe we need to be more public in relief work and things like that to show that like we're contributing to society, and then we'll be, you know, likable enough to not be killed or killable. And October 7th happened, and that didn't work either. Like it's not like doing just relief effort. Yes, it's one front and it's important, and we have to contribute to society, and we believe that we have guidance, that we have principles that stand to benefit every single American.
Yeah.
It's not a tribalistic thing. Okay, but you're not going to get anywhere without building power.
Yeah.
You're not going to get anywhere by being likable.
Yeah.
Being likable is actually very useless
Yeah.
when it comes to political power, right? And so I think that the light came on for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And this is something the African-American community already knew,
Yeah.
which is just another
All
reason.
just kind of woke up.
Yeah, it's like the meme where it's like, first time, huh? Right? It's like this is something that if we had better connectivity and relations, you could have imagined a scenario in which this lesson was learned earlier.
Yeah.
Okay? It wasn't. Alhamdulillah. It is what it is. But we realize that now you're not going to be able to hide.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to. Evil doesn't rest.
Yeah. But did they scare us? So with the Holy Land Foundation, all the things that happened in those cases, they almost scared everyone not to get involved.
Sure. And they tried to scare people with when segregation ended, and they tried to scare people.
But we got scared, though, because we didn't do anything.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like, and this is why the civil rights movement is a very important model. And I try to tell people when I go to these conferences and conventions and on stage, it's like, look at what was the price that had to be paid.
Yeah.
You can't run away from it. You can go back to segregation if you want to hide, or you can get bit by the dogs of the police. You can get beat up by the police. You can get arrested. You know, everything that had to happen. Some people got lynched.
Yeah.
Like there was a price to pay.
Yeah.
If we want the current regime of criminalizing Islam and criminalizing Muslims to end, you can't run away from it. If you run away from it, you're only going to kick the can down the road. You have to, there's come the time in the community where you're going to have to face it head on and pay the price and organize. And whatever that price is, some of us are going to have to get arrested. Some of us are going to be shut down.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like these are things that happen in history.
Yeah.
But we can't let that make us get into this survival mode where I'm just nefsi.
Yeah.
I'm just going to save myself. No, we're not going to get around this. We have to get through this.
So,
And I think the community has started to wake up to that reality, at least the immigrant community.
Yeah, I had a point to add to that because actually my parents come from the immigrant community. They came here about 10 years ago, and I'd say in between of that community, they almost have so much belief in the Ummah on the international level that when you look outside, you have countries like Saudi Arabia or Qatar, or, you know, we have some of the richest countries in the world. We're a little over 3 billion people that you wouldn't need to build power in America to be able to defend your brothers and sisters in Palestine or in Lebanon.
Yeah, it's backwards because all of those are client states. They call them garrison states. Jordan is doing exactly what it was set up to do. Egypt is doing exactly what it was set up to do. You know, Saudi and all the other governments, they're allowed to operate the way they're allowed to operate because they're doing exactly what they were designed to do, which is to contain the ummah, right? Like, do you think that if all these governments disappeared tomorrow, what would be the status of the occupation?
Oh,
The Shah, forget it.
They said there's 800 U.S. military bases in the world.
That's not an accident.
And they're all housed. You got some of them housed in the Gulf states.
That's not an accident, right? So this is a very deliberate thing. Now, what is the main, if we imagine that this is a chessboard, who's the queen of the chessboard? It's American foreign policy, right? So actually, the people with the most amount of responsibility, it's not the people in Jordan. It's not the people in Misr. It's the people in America. Like the most important thing that we could do as a contribution to this ummah is to change the foreign policy of the United States of America. Imagine Egypt and Morsi without American pressure and then putting Sisi in power. Imagine Erdogan without America always breathing down his neck and destabilizing his economy. Imagine Imran Khan in Pakistan without American attempts to meddle and to overthrow him and to criminalize him or guarantees for the safety of those who do, right? So this is not to say that these people are perfect, at all. Like they have their own things.
They should be able to lead their own countries.
Well, the thing is that the American imperial power is always part of the equation, and it's a huge part of the equation. And Muslims in America have an exceptional responsibility to diminish or to end that imperial pressure. And if we do, it will create so much opportunity and breathing room, right, within the ummah, so that who are all the leaders? We never got to know their names because they rotting away in a prison, or they were killed in the middle of the night because at the U.S.'s behest, or at least the U.S. approved of it and gave the thumbs up to it, right? So if we're able to take the pressure off on our side, who knows what's possible? But that's our responsibility. We won't be able to change anything in Jordan. We won't be able to change anything in Egypt from here. But if we change what the United States, its role is in the world, then we will change things over there, right?
I wish we did it sooner. I mean, that's always my thought. I'm just like, man, I wish we got involved with this much sooner, because foreign policy does shape the entire world. And we're constantly trying at different moments, right? We had the Syrian Revolution, we had the Egyptian Revolution, and like, we start to get involved, and then we go back to sleep for a long time. So,
or even worse, and we talked about this on the way over as well, the diaspora communities in the U.S., they treat American imperial power like the ring in Lord of the Rings, right? They say like, well, we'll just use the imperial power of the U.S. for our interest this one time. Like, we want to remove this regime, or we want to like help, back home in this particular way. But they don't realize that they're strengthening a vehicle that is going to turn on them sooner or later. And even if it doesn't turn on them, it's going to hurt other places in the ummah immediately. So that's it's sometimes in the Sharia, hatta Sharia, you have to you have to tolerate a short-term harm for a long-term gain, right? That the ultimate game is to defang the American military-industrial complex and the imperial power. That would be the biggest ni'mah that we could help with the ummah, rather than try to use American imperial power to bring about like one positive change here or there.
It goes back in history. It's like 100 years ago, almost 100 years ago, or somewhere on that timeline, is that Muslims were allying with the British against the Ottoman Empire, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they used that, and they thought that we're just going to do it this one time. And then that was it. They shot themselves in the foot.
And the consequences were what they were, and that's no accident, right? And that's where we come back to wala wal bara'ah, right? You can find a maslahah if you think hard enough. Shaitan will give you a maslahah. But what were the long-term consequences of running to people outside of our community to support you against your community? It's
terrible move.
We're looking at them now.
So, last piece of advice: next 4 years, what's your thoughts? What should the Muslim community do? What should they focus on? How should they?
This is how we start to work now. This is where the real work happens, right? The Prophet ﷺ, he said, one of the things to do to get into Jannah, as-salah wa nasu niyam, that you struggle and strive when everybody else is falling asleep. Most Americans are not paying attention to politics 24/7 year round. Most of them, they just wake up every 4 years and they participate in the general elections for a couple months, and then they go back to Netflix and chill, right? So we have to pay attention and do the work, put in the work early and all. It doesn't take that much. I'll tell you, in Pennsylvania, I meet with a group of guys from the masajid, 1 hour a week. That's it, over Zoom.
Consistency.
It's that's it. It's just an out. No matter what I'm doing, if I'm on the road or I'm at home, like I'll make sure that I make that hour.
Okay.
It's a working meeting.
Yeah.
We're moving through slow, but I told them, I said, I guarantee you, if we put in an hour a week for 52 weeks, we will have done so much by the time we hit week 52 that we're actually going to be in a decent position. So one of the things that we did, we're mapping out the whole area. Who's in charge where and what are they responsible for? Like we have the mosques that we're looking at. What ward is the mosque in, of what city? Who are the local representatives? How does the city council work? When are the city council elections? Who's the mayor? When are the mayoral elections? We start to make profiles on those individuals. How did they vote? We articulate our issues. What are our issues? What are the issues that if something came across the desk of a mayor or a city councilman, what are the ones that affect us the most? And let's prioritize them. Let's rank them as to what's the high priority, low priority, mid priority. And then we make a profile for every individual and say, well, here's their voting behavior. Here's what they've done. And some people you'll start to notice, it's like, oh, this person's a pretty good job. Let's keep them there. We have an interest in keeping them there. And other people, it's like, oh, this person's got to go. This person's like very, very problematic. Then you look at the numbers. Okay, well, how much did they win by last election? It takes only about 2,000 votes to get on a city council. And the primaries for those city council elections are often less than that. And there's other places where it's even lower than that. Like, Allentown's a mid-sized city. So, going through and crunching the number. What's the next election coming up? 2025. We've got 4 city council people that are up for election. The mayor's up for election. So now we have a goal. We've got a 1-year plan. We're going to study this election. We're going to try to do quarterly voter registration things in the mosque. We're not going to wait till election season. We're going to do every quarter. We're going to do a voter registration. We're going to do a election debrief where we present to the community what changed, who's in, who's out, what they lose by, etc.
Is there an organizational structure behind this?
There's no organizational structure. There's just a loose group of people. There's a loose group of people. One day we'll come up with a name and we'll have an organizational structure. But every mosque has to do this. Every mosque has to do this. And mosques now, they have civic engagement committees and stuff like that. Every civic engagement community should be doing committee should be doing this. That it's not about showing up here. And here's the other thing. We're going to map out, when do all these bodies meet? When does the city council meet? How often? When? What are the times? With or other bodies, like when? How often? How the school board? How often do they meet? And we're going to organize. Let's get 8 volunteers. Rotate, so that we've got someone going, just one person going to each meeting, and they rotate, so it's not too much a burden on anybody. And then you come and report back. Is there anything that we should be aware of? Is there anything that's coming down the pipeline, right? Did someone demonstrate a particular problematic thing that we need to be aware of? Or did someone actually demonstrate that they are a serious ally and an asset to the Muslim community, right? Like, this is the type of not glamorous, not social media worthy work.
No selfies at the White House.
No selfies at the White House.
At the iftar.
This is the work. This is the work that has to be done. And I guarantee you that if you do this and you crunch the numbers and you start to see, okay, this person, it's only going to take 2,000 votes. How many people do we have? How many votes can we generate? Like, what can we do? Okay, the mosques need to become polling places. Okay, let's have a town hall where we invite the candidates in nice and early. We're asking the questions. I've been in communities where the mosques, they just let the politicians just come in and speak. That's it. You're allowing them to have their own commercial, essentially. It's like, no, you ask that, you put them on the hot seat. Like, what are you going to do if this happens? What are you going to do if that happens? Like, and then you save that and you are able to now, like, hold them accountable to that. This is the work that every single community has to do. And I guarantee you that the majority of Americans are not doing this work. It's literally there for the taking. So if you're able to do it and you're able to replicate it and you start super local and then you start to build, you start to look at the state government, you start to look at the federal government, the opportunities just start to present themselves. Once you start paying attention and seeing how, I want to say easy it is, but how, like, it's just all right happening in front of you. You literally just have to pay attention and get involved. It will become very obvious what are the things that you should be doing and what are your opportunities. And you think, we had a unique opportunity we totally dropped. We didn't have the numbers because we weren't ready for it. Where the state treasurer, the Democrat, I think her name was Erin McClellan, running for state treasurer, was going to divest Pennsylvania from Israeli bonds. Right? She lost by 300 votes.
Wow. State
level. It's nothing. That's a Juma.
And nobody paid attention.
And nobody paid attention to it. We didn't have the messaging. We didn't have the social media platforms. We didn't have, that infrastructure. This is the time of building that infrastructure. Again, we'll go full circle. Organized message, organized money, organized people, organized action. If you wanted to tell everybody to scratch their head or their right ear at 10 p.m. on a Wednesday, what are the vehicles that you need to actually have that happen? And what are the resources that you need to actually have that happen? That's what we're developing, where you have to be, it's like, okay, we know that we have a once in a generation opportunity to divest from Israeli bonds. Now we deploy, we get the messaging out. Now we're able to affect things. So this is the type of stuff that every community needs to be doing.
And it comes down to a greater point, is that all politics is local. If we're shaping our local communities, then we're going to influence the greater administration, but we have to do it locally first.
Absolutely. Right? And that affects two things. First of all, it affects the pipeline, because a lot of people who want to eventually be in Congress, they start at a local level. So you're actually starting to weed out some of the problematic people early before they are on the radar of AIPAC, right? And they get funded. And then you're also, I forgot the second point, but you're building a vehicle that can be used for many different things. And it's like, you can use a car to take the kids to soccer practice, or to go on a road trip, or to do this. You build a vehicle, and then it can do a lot of different types of work.
One last thought on apathy. We have a lot of apathy in the community. A lot of people feel defeated, right? And they feel like, oh, this is just too much, and they check out.
Yeah.
Is that just passively accepting what's happening to us?
Well, I mean, I think that this is the story of Dhul Qarnayn, right? And Surah Al-Kahf, when he comes to the third group of people, and they basically say, Ya'juj and Ma'juj are running all over us. What can we pay you to fix it? Kharjan, we want to give you something so that you can build a wall. Build a wall, and Ya'juj and Ma'juj are going to pay for it, right? But Dhul Qarnayn responds to them by teaching them that they have to participate. So help me with power, and that's another use of power. So fa'ayuni biquwwa, right? So he demands that they participate in it. So that's our situation, that everybody has to realize that you have to participate. Now, I think that it becomes intimidating because it's unknown. And you don't realize that these things, again, like when I was still living in New York, the city council, it only took 300 votes in our ward to put somebody on the city council. That's, again, nothing. That's nothing. So that's why I like the 1 hour a week, like just 1 hour a week. If you get people for just 1 hour a week, the more that you start, untie the knot, you see how unintimidating it is, really. They got big buildings, they got nice shiny shoes, they got stuffed suits, but at the end of the day, it's not that impressive. Like, you can actually do stuff.
It's being organized, being consistent. I just saw you put out a video on atomic habits the other day.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, mashallah.
Important to build habits. Jazakallah khair, Imam Tom. We really appreciate you spending the time with us, and thank you for joining us in California.
Thank you so much. Barakallahu feekum.
Jazakallah khair.